Call the member for Port Stephens.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. As a piece of public policy, the creation of the National Disability Insurance Scheme was a monumental reform. Its objective was simple and yet profound. A tangled mess of chaotic, fragmented and inequitable support programs littered across the country would be replaced with a national scheme focused on equity. The so-called postcode lottery would end and the genesis of a person's disability would be irrelevant. It would be based instead upon need. The purpose of the scheme was to enable people with disability to fulfil their potential, engage meaningfully with their communities and to live their lives with respect and dignity. Alongside Medicare and superannuation, this Labor initiative will have a lasting legacy on the future of our country and our citizens. However, unfortunately, as many members of this place would know, the implementation of the scheme to date has largely been a shambles that's been compounded by this Berejiklian government's decision to wash its hands of all responsibility for people with disabilities in this state. This government's response to the NDIS has been to privatise home care, to shut up shop on ADIC, and so supports and services which were once relied on by people with disabilities are no longer there. The Hunters Large residential centres, Stockton Centre, Tomaree Lodge and Morisset, are now being managed by FACS and not ADIC. As the Acting Shadow Minister for Disability Services, I have met with countless NDIS participants, carers, advocates and service providers, alongside my colleague Sophie Kotsis, the Shadow Minister for Disability Services. So many people are struggling in their interactions with the NDIS scheme. There are many people struggling at all stages of the process, trying to participate, trying to get a plan that reflects their needs, trying to maintain a plan that works, then trying to access the supports and services that they or their loved ones need. This last element, trying to access the supports and services they are funded for, is particularly difficult for people living in the regions. For the record, I want to acknowledge that I'm largely hearing from people and organisations that are struggling, and that there are many people who have benefited enormously from the scheme already. The life-changing independence they have achieved is what the scheme is about, and those successes are definitely worth celebrating. But alongside that, there are many people that are struggling. And it's interesting for me that the people that are facing those challenges, there is still amongst them a deeper understanding that the scheme is worthwhile and that the federal and state coalition governments just need to make it work. Systems must be improved. The gaps in services need to be addressed. People need to be able to access services, and those services and the quality of those services we must ensure that there are oversights and safeguards to ensure that those services are quality services, and people just generally, they need more help. From the very beginning, the New South Wales Government has seen the NDIS as a way of removing responsibility and liability from the government and the cost involved with supporting the people. In doing so, they have ignored the fact that many, many people with disabilities in this state will never participate in the NDIS, and many of them are now wondering and looking for services and supports that are no longer there. The government's management of the closure of the Stockton Centre, Tomaree Lodge and Morisset Disability Centres is nothing short of shameful. The closure of these centres was announced many years ago, and the orderly process of moving residents into new homes was meant to conclude next month. Instead, the promised new homes for those residents are not there. The closure has now been extended to 2020 and residents are living in limbo. I've previously spoken in this place before of the neglect of the first residents who were relocated from those homes to a group home. I don't intend to revisit that tragedy here today, but suffice to say that people died in the most tragic of circumstances that were entirely preventable. Families of residents in those centres are now left wondering what the future is like for their loved ones. The services on site at those services have been whittled away. The departmental group tasked with supporting the transition has been disbanded. For those residents with no family who the public guardian has responsibility for, there are many of us frightened to think what their future looks like. Because what we must always remember is that the decisions we make in this place with regard to the provision of services to people with a disability have very real consequences. So we have to get this right. When we are talking about people with complex intellectual and physical disabilities particularly, there is little room for error. I think it's time that the government took stock, both federally and the state government, and returned to the original goals of the NDIS, the twin aspirations of choice and control, which have not been met for too many people. We want to make sure that we have a society that's accessible to everyone, where everyone can achieve their potential regardless of where they live. I urge the state and coalition, federal and state coalition governments to do more to ensure that all people have this access to services that they need.
Member Port Stephens will resume her seat.